Going to install the brand new EngineStat Pro. You may be familiar with the EngineStat Classic, which provides onboard computer diagnostics for your classic car. This little black box is installed inside the engine bay of your classic car, and on your phone or tablet you can get all kinds of critical engine data so that your engine does not fry. Old classic car engine monitoring systems like oil pressure systems, battery voltage, doesn't matter if they're gauges, they're very unreliable. They can cause you all kinds of grief. EngineStat is like a Amber Alert for your car. Classic car's instrumentation cluster is pretty much useless if you worry about your engine burning up from low oil or high temperature. For instance, this particular Mustang has an oil pressure gauge. It has an L and an H on it. You have no idea what the pressure actually is, how much oil is in the car, or if that gauge is even working. For instance, right now it shows that it's fairly close to the L. Is that a problem? Do you need to jump out and check the oil? If I rev the engine, it doesn't really move very much. It moves a little bit. It doesn't really tell me anything. I've had a lot of people say, well, I have an oil pressure gauge. Well, what does it tell you? Nothing. In a classic car, the gauges are merely for decoration. Even if you put modern gauges in your car, are they going to bring your attention to a problem? Here's the temperature gauge right here, a little bit of glare on it. It's showing C. It's showing almost cold. If you want to protect your engine, classic car gauges are pretty much worthless. They're really for entertainment purposes only. With EngineStat, however, I'll show you here, we have EngineStat running on this car. We have oil pressure, 26 psi, temperature, a little hard to see, temperature 150 degrees, and we have battery voltage, 14.1 volts. We have speed. You can check your speed to verify that it's good. And if any of these things go out of parameters that you have set, pressure, temperature, EngineStat will send off an alarm. Your phone will vibrate and a tone will sound even if the phone is in the black mode, that is, if it's in standby mode. EngineStat is still running. It can still safeguard your car. So you don't have to watch your phone. You put it in your pocket and you're safe to go. EngineStat will show you engine RPM, so which helps you tune. Are you running at the right RPM? Engine vacuum is very useful for setting idle, mixture, or timing parameters on your car. So these gauges here tell me basically close to L, but is that a problem? Well, 27 psi. If I rev the engine up, you'll notice that the pressure goes back up. 45 psi. Also temperature. Well, the famous Mustang gauges tell me it's close to C. Well, actually, our radiator temperature is 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I wouldn't call that cold. It's not abnormal. It's in normal operating temperature. But if this exceeded my alarm setting, which is 189 on this particular car, I'd know about it. I wouldn't know about it from looking at this gauge. I would just see the needle move a little bit farther towards the H. Pretty useless. Well, most classic car gauges are completely useless for protecting your valuable engine. Don't let these archaic gauge systems destroy your irreplaceable classic car engine. Mustang Project's EngineStat gives you the information you need at your fingertips and also provides alarms even when your phone is blacking off so that you never have a problem that you don't know about. So we've opened the kit up just to illustrate what comes with your EngineStat Pro kit. Of course, you get the EngineStat module, which is very similar to the EngineStat Classic, except for it has this extra green connection on the end, and it has different electronics inside, of course. You'll also get all the wiring that you need, connectors, the all-important oil pressure sensor, and you also get the brass fittings that you need for most applications. These brass fittings will work with many classic cars. They're 1/4 NPT or 1/8 NPT. If there is a different configuration on your car, it'll be very easy for you to get the right fitting at a hardware store, Home Depot, or the like. You also get a complete set of instructions that take you step by step through the installation of the EngineStat. The EngineStat communicates to your smartphone via Bluetooth. Gives you all this useful data. Most importantly, it gives you alarms if something is going wrong with your engine before your engine is destroyed. I forgot to mention you also get a temperature sensor. This is a radiator mounted temperature sensor, very easy to install, much more useful in many ways than the temperature sensors built into the car's engine block. All right, now we will go install this thing, and it's about an hour to install. Very easy to install, and you can then cruise without worry. As you know, your engine is protected, and you can also have some great features like virtual gauges. The first thing to do when installing EngineStat is to disconnect the negative cable on the battery. Always disconnect the negative cable first. Once you do that, it's safe to install EngineStat. Do not install EngineStat with the battery connected. If you do so, you'll avoid the warranty. Because if you make a mistake during wiring, you might short something out. You don't want to do that. Next thing we're going to do is sort of decide where we want to place the EngineStat. The best place to mount an EngineStat, especially if you want to hide it so the car looks all original, is back near the brake booster, near the firewall. Any place along there. You do not want it near a very high heat source, for instance a header or something like that. The firewall is often the best place. Now to just give you an overview, very simple to install. We're going to splice in a vacuum line to the vacuum advance hose right there on the distributor. We'll cut that and splice that in. We're going to connect, of course, a ground. The ground can be any convenient chassis ground. The kit will come with wire for all these connections with substantial amounts of wire, with a temperature probe connector and probe, and with end connectors. So you can trim these wires to exactly the length that you want, so you can make a neat installation. We decided to install our EngineStat right against the firewall, sort of in the center. You can see there that we've mounted it against the heater box. It's a good place. It's easier for us to reach the distributor vacuum line, and we'll have plenty of wire to reach the other sensors. Now, the first component we're going to install with the EngineStat is the coolant temperature sensor. Now this sensor fits between the fins of the radiator, and you want to place it as close as you can to the radiator outlet, which is this hose right here, the top hose, as possible. And make sure, of course, it's not going to be in the way of the fan. In this case, we will just simply insert it into the fins and push it in. Now before we push it in, we will make sure and use plenty of the provided thermal grease. The better their thermal conductivity is between this piece and the fins of the radiator, the more likely it is you'll get an accurate temperature measurement. Now the important thing is not the absolute temperature measurement in this case, but the changes that you might see. If you see a sudden rise or fall in temperature, or something uncharacteristic for your particular car, then you should be worried. So what we'll do now is we'll just wedge that in there, straight between the fins. We could install it this way if we wanted to. You can see how it'll go between the fins here. Or we could install it from the other side. We're going to install it on this car from the other side because it'll be more hidden, more original looking. Okay, we've installed our temperature sensor. You see we've just pushed it into the fins. Make careful not to destroy any part of the radiator while we do that, but it fits nicely with the fins, and lots of the thermal grease will give us good thermal conductivity. We've routed the wire along the original wiring loom so we can see how it can fit right into the car without being very noticeable. Alright, all we have to do now is plug in the thermal sensor connector, which goes on like this. That's that. Now all we have to do is hook up the tachometer connection, the battery connection, the oil pressure monitoring connections, and we'll do that now. We've connected our yellow and red wires. These wires go to the coil positive and coil minus. Red, coil positive. Yellow, coil minus. We're also going to hook up our vacuum line. We routed these in a nice, clean, efficient manner. First thing we're going to do is connect our distributor vacuum hose. So we simply cut the distributor vacuum hose at a point that makes sense for us for this particular car, and we just insert it here like this. Very simple. Now we're going to connect the coil plus, which would be the red wire. We've loosened these wires, and the coils in your car will be clearly marked with a plus or a minus. So sometimes it's a good idea to look closely at the coil to make absolutely sure you get these in the right place, because if you don't, the system won't work. So the top of the coil will be mounted usually with a raised embossed sort of symbol for plus and a raised embossed symbol for minus. So the red goes on the plus and the yellow will go on the minus. Now we're going to connect the black ground wire and the brown battery monitor wire. So we'll just route it through our harness just like the other wires, and we're going to connect them over here with the ring terminals provided. Now we decided to put the black wire right on the battery terminal bolt, the brown wire on the battery terminal voltage bolt, just like that. The ring terminals come in the kit. You can connect this black wire to any chassis ground that you think is reliable. The brown wire needs to go to somewhere where there's battery voltage. Alright, next, all we have to do now is to connect the oil pressure sensor wire, which of course, no set of adapters will work with every single car, but this set of pieces we've selected will work with many classic cars. For instance, the GM cars won't require the long tube and the elbow, but they will require these other components, the couplers and the T connection. The EngineStat Pro oil sensor will work with any classic car, all the way from the 30s to the 80s. And if you don't have exactly the pieces you need in the kit, you can easily find brass fittings that are 1/4 NPT or 1/8 NPT at your local hardware store or at Home Depot. These are all very common types of pieces. Just remember 1/4 NPT or 1/8 NPT. We removed the oil filter so things are easier to see. This is the original oil sensor and little tube that screws into the engine block right up there by the oil filter. You can see that. So we're going to replace this tube with the tube that comes in the kit, and we're going to reuse the existing oil sensor and put on the new EngineStat oil sensor. This is how the new system will go in. I'll give you a clear shot of it. It's a tube, a straight tube, the T, and the other elbow. This is the old sensor here. Down here at the bottom is the new sensor. Of course, we have to put this in the right order. We'll screw in the long tube first with the T on it, or the so-called street T, which is just a right angle elbow, and then the couplers, and then the various sensors. And all that goes right up here, just as it was originally, except for with the addition of the new sensor. Very easy to do once you know how. Your kit includes all of these pieces here, which will work for most cars. Now, many cars are different, and you may not need the tube, you may not need the elbow, you may need some other adapter. All of these are common fittings available at any Home Depot store. If your particular car engine is configured differently and the connection to the oil pressure sensor is a little bit in a little different spot, you should be easily able to get an adapter to move things around the way you would like to have them, so they'll fit in the car. This particular kit is ideal for the 68 Mustang and almost all the classic cars built in the 60s, plus or minus some of the various pieces here. Alright, we're going to begin to install the fittings. We always put a little bead of liquid Teflon around the end of our, around the threads rather, of our NPT type fittings. This will help create lubrication and get a good seal. All right, we've got the installation done now. We have the 4-inch tube here going to the street T fitting, then the T fitting, coupler, the new EngineStat Pro sensor, and the old sensor. Now we'll put in the oil filter and test it for leaks and finish our wiring.